Hello and welcome to the European Resilience Initiative Center video podcast. After Russia has started its full-scale genocidal war against Ukraine, many Ukrainians who had their peaceful civilian jobs before had to join Ukrainian army. Teachers, opera singers, medics, farmers, university professors, lawyers have volunteered. Volodymyr Omelyan is one of such volunteers. He was an economist and a foreign policy expert. He worked as a Minister of Infrastructure of Ukraine until 2019, and now he is a major of Ukrainian army serving at the 104th Brigade of Territorial Defense. We have talked to Volodymyr during his stay in Kiev, where he's healing after 2 of his wounds. Good morning, sir, and thank you for your service.
Hello, Sergei. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much that you have found time for this conversation. You have got wounded at Kupiansk, a Ukrainian city very close to the Russian border, just 20 kilometers from the border, after Russians have dropped 2 glide bombs on your position. Do Russians still control the sky over the front line despite all the air defense and jets?
Yes, they do control, and I would say it's one of the biggest challenges to our army because Western armies used to fight when the skies are totally controlled by Western aviation. They never look up. They know that everything what is in the air, it belongs to them or to their allies. In case of Ukraine, we have to look up all the time because any second you can get some present from Russia, sent with hate, not love, and it concerns everybody. Definitely our army at the front line, but also our civilians far away from the fighting sites. And in my particular case, it was not a surprise. We were heavily bombed every day with Russian gliding bombs. And I would say that it was good luck for me that I was only hit by more than 15 pieces of shrapnel, and my leg was damaged by the piece of this bomb. But in normal situation, if they hit the target, I would have been dead.
That is indeed the reality on the front line, but not only. We know the Ukrainian cities are being constantly bombed by Russian missiles and drones. We know just within January, several people have been killed in the capital of Ukraine, in Kiev, by Russian drones, and in other cities which are not that well protected by the air defense as Kiev is, like Zaporizhia, Kryvyi Rih, Kharkiv, Sumy. People get killed every week by Russian bombings. Is Ukraine losing this war? Is Ukraine winning this war? It is hard to say, as we know that at the same day, Ukraine managed to destroy another Russian oil refinery far behind the front line. So who prevails in this war? Russia, which terrorizes Ukrainian population, or Ukraine, which hits military targets or dual-use targets?
I should also mention Kherson, which is heavily bombed daily, every day by Russian aviation, by Russian drones. But if we talk about the situation in the battlefield, I would say that we are winning and we are prevailing. Because first of all, we broke all Russian dreams to capture Ukraine within a couple of days or weeks, as they were talking loudly before and during first days of invasion. We destroyed Red Army, and it's not a threat anymore to NATO or any NATO country. Definitely, some small NATO states should be also aware of possible Russian invasion. First of all, I talk about Baltic states, and if, I hope it will never happen, but if Ukraine fails, definitely Russia will try to attack Poland Hungary, Slovak Republic, regardless all sympathy that Fico and Orban gives to Kremlin. So, yes, Russia is progressing. Every day they manage to capture another kilometer or two of Ukrainian territory, killing more civilians and our soldiers. But it's not an easy walk. It's not a overwhelming victory. It's not the dream Putin started this war with. And actually, it's not the result Kremlin was thinking about, that Ukraine falls and we march to the English Channel and capture everything and nothing will stop us. Recently commenting to BBC about signing 100 years cooperation agreement between United Kingdom and Ukraine, I stated that it's really wise decision for Europeans to send their troops to the eastern border of Ukraine to protect Europe and West from another invasion of horde. Because it's much better to do it in Ukraine than do it once again in Dunkirk, waiting for another wave of new Nazis to conquest Europe.
Indeed, and we know that Russia always is very successful in their terrorist tactics on the occupied territories. They manage to force the population of the occupied territories to fight for them, just throwing one meat wave after another. We know there are almost no males in the conscript age left on the occupied Russian territories in Donetsk and in Luhansk, because all these people were forcibly conscripted and sent to the front line. Of course, Russia will do the same in other regions if Russia gets them, and all these people will be sent to the front line against other European nations. But before you have joined Ministry of Infrastructure as a Minister of Infrastructure, you worked a long time for Ukraine's foreign ministry, and in particular, you were responsible for cooperation with NATO. What is the current stand of Ukraine's relations with NATO countries? We know the Ukrainian army is extremely well integrated now into using NATO equipment, into implementing NATO tactics, but Ukraine is still not a NATO member, not even invitation has been issued. What is the situation? Is it like a sort of strange codependency when Ukraine says we're ready to join, we are the strongest army in continental Europe, but NATO is not ready to accept Ukraine yet?
And it's, I think, tragedy for not only Ukraine, but for NATO. Because if you are scared of some possible future actions of your enemy, you will be dead, and your enemy will prevail. I clearly remember those brave statements of many NATO leaders in the past that not a single country is allowed to dictate NATO who is going to become a member of it and who is not. Not a single state from outside is welcomed or allowed to interfere into NATO policy. Now it turns out that all those basic principles are broken by some state which is barbarian by its nature and keeps the same spirit for decades and centuries. And for me, it's a very sad picture, because that's why I call it tragedy. And I hope that courage will come back once upon a time to the NATO member states, and they will recall that this is the organization of lions, not sheep, just waiting for future and trying to keep the line of the border. Roman Empire was strong when it was expanding. A Roman Empire became weak when it tried to build walls to protect from the hordes and tribes coming from the east. We shall expand. Ukraine is a European state. Ukraine shall become west for east. And this is the only way for NATO to survive. I do remember those times when new members of NATO were welcomed. Poland, Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, Romania used this window of opportunity to jump in. And nobody was threatened by that time by Russia or its possible actions. Yes, Russia was weaker, but still it was Russia. Still, their presidents were speaking loudly that we shall control Eastern Europe. Just remember all those talks of drunk Yeltsin with Clinton, President of the United States at that time, when he called him and demanded, look, Europe is mine. Give it to me, and you can take the rest of the world. Bill Clinton was laughing at those statements because he didn't take it serious. And unfortunately, he was also wrong, because Kremlin is always serious when they talk about occupation. That's why we have only two options to test. To make appearance that we keep Ukraine outside of NATO, and let's try to feed the enemy by ignoring the fact that enemy is getting stronger, or to take Ukraine on board, whatever it takes. And believe me, with 100% of certainty, I'm sure that Russia will never attack a single NATO soldier, because they are not ready to fight NATO. And especially now, when Red Army is out of stocks they collected since the World War II.
Indeed, that is very few have in this very solid and clear understanding that currently Russia is using all the stocks which the whole Soviet Union was collecting since 1950s, non-stop, tens of thousands of tanks, artillery systems, infantry fighting vehicles, only gathered to attack Europe one day, and they are now being sent to the front one by one. Coming a bit back to this perception of fear, you have mentioned before the fear of Western leaders of a confrontation with Russia or of some direct conflict, direct involvement of the West against Russian forces. Is fear of the Western politicians, isn't it the strongest weapon Russia has against NATO?
I would say that best and most favorable instrument of Kremlin is not even a fear. Fear, it's a kind of result of it, but it's a chaos. When you have chaos in neighboring countries, when you have chaos in most powerful nations of the world, you can somehow use this situation. There is no big plan of Russia, but the situation is that when democracy is in chaos, it's not operational, it's weak. Kremlin is always strong because it's one-man show. It's the only Tsar who is ready and allowed to decide destiny of each citizen of a Russian Empire. So, using this instrument of chaos, they progress in Georgia, they progressed in Ukraine until recent times, until 2014. They tried to make progress in the United States or Great Britain or Germany. So, it's all the same approach. So, when I was a minister and talking to my colleague in Paris, she was an amazing woman at that time, Minister of Infrastructure, and she was appointed Prime Minister of France. And there were a lot of riots all over France protesting against the government. And I talked to her and said that, look, have a deeper look. I'm 100% sure that there is Russia behind all those riots and strikes and vandals show in Paris. She was laughing at me at first stage, but then she called me and told me over closed messenger, you are absolutely right. We tracked Russians there. So I would say if democracies are strong, if all institutions work, we can simply ignore all attempts of Kremlin. For Western leaders, I wish I can join them in their mission to Mars. I think it's a great story. I'm a lover of fantasy and all those great spaceship travels. But can we make Mars better if we have many issues on Earth unsettled? Can we do something here right now by simply destroying the autocracies and trying to make world in a good type, democracy type? So this is the main issue from my side to Western leaders. What kind of course they take for their vessels? Because to have a fantasy that we will build another world somewhere there, or we keep our world safe behind the walls, they will never come true.
Indeed, and we know what you described in France. The same is true for Germany. In Germany, we know that every time we have elections, several weeks before, a wave of terrorist attacks happen in Germany. And then you need to ask yourself, who is a political force which is interested in such chaos in Germany? And you can say Russia is clearly interested. And that is what Russia knows how to do. That is what KGB under the Soviet Union and FSB under Russian Federation is doing all the time. So you should expect that they act. Also because they're not a state where rule of law is being implemented. They don't need to care about acting within the legal framework. They can just do whatever the boss says. And Vladimir Putin is obviously a fan of such actions. Think about all assassinations abroad he has obviously personally ordered. But what I wanted to ask you before we go further to your experience as a soldier, I want to address your experience as a Minister of Infrastructure. We know that there are like practically two competitions on the infrastructure field. One is Russia and now probably China attacking Western infrastructure, cables in the Baltic Sea, cables in Taiwan. And another is Ukraine's attempt to switch off Russian energy infrastructure in oil and gas. What are the lessons we can pull out of these two developments? How can we, will Russia be able to shut down the West before brave Ukrainian army will be able to shut down Russia's economy?
No, the problem with West is that they are not ready for response. When Russia missile enters NATO aviation space, the reaction should be immediate. Maybe you are not still able or ready to attack Russian combat jet or to destroy the Russian military airport where the jet took off. But to intercept this missile, you have to, because it's your territory. And to say publicly, oh, it was kind of only a couple of seconds or a couple of minutes, this missile was in NATO aviation space, doesn't really matter. Oh, there is another Shahed hitting something in Romania. It doesn't really matter. Oh, there is some kind of commercial ship from China or from Russia cutting all pipes or connection cables between NATO member states. Guys, it really matters. You are attacked. It's not Ukraine anymore. It's you. Your infrastructure is attacked by hostile enemy states. And there is no reaction. The same way when NATO citizens, if we call them, or let's say citizens of NATO member states, were killed in streets of Paris, Czech Republic, London, even Washington, with visible Russian track of intelligence. We just didn't do a scandal. And that's it. No, those people were killed in your streets by Russian special agents. It's direct invasion. They are infiltrated. They are among you. No reaction. And, you know, it's a kind of real Asian approach. We test you. Okay, if we do in this way, how will you react? Oh, there is no reaction. Okay, we will do it different way. Again, no reaction. Then they simply consider that you are not able to respond. And this is actually what happened with Ukraine. Because if NATO troops were sent to Ukraine for training in January, beginning of February 2022, there would have been no invasion. I'm 100% sure. No threat, no attack. We just sent our 10,000 or 20,000 people brigades to train in Ukraine for some international training. That would be the end of Putin's story. Because he's afraid of attack NATO, but he is always ready to test NATO ability to respond. If there is no response, he proceeds further. So in our case, when we attack Russian infrastructure, it's payback. War will come to Russian territory. As it is now in Kursk region, the same will be with many other regions of Russia, including Moscow and St. Petersburg. It's inevitable. It will come for sure. And there is no issue of time. We will make Russia suffer and to pay for every killed Ukrainians by killing Russians.
And that is obviously what Russians understand very well. We remember the cases of direct confrontation of Russian army with armies of NATO countries, like in the Turkey, when the Russian jets repeatedly violated Turkish airspace for several minutes, for several seconds maybe, like flying through an appendix of Turkish territory. One day, Russian jet has just been shot down by the Turkish army, and there was no reaction from the Russian side. They threatened to impose some sanctions on Turkish agricultural products, and they have not even done that, but they have never ever again crossed or dared to cross Turkish sovereign airspace. So we can imagine that. And 2 Russian pilots have been killed back then. It wasn't just property damage. So we can imagine that the same Russian retreat would have followed in a case when NATO countries would have pulled a very clear line where the Russians may not cross. Indeed. So still, this mentioning of Russian economy, which gets hit by Ukrainian drones, we know now that Russian oil refineries on the distance up to 1,000 kilometers from the Ukrainian border are not safe anymore. Recently, the third, I think, largest Russian oil refinery close to Nizhny Novgorod and Volga region has been hit by Ukrainian drones, causing large fire in Ryazan. Power plants and oil refineries have been hit all over Russia, even starting from Chechnya in Caucasus up to St. Petersburg in the north. Russian infrastructure objects get hit. Do we expect any development here as Russian oil refineries burning are not in use anymore? It's something what happens. Will Ukraine continue expand attacking Russian targets? What Ukraine needs for that?
It works. And by hitting Russian refineries, we managed to see that Russian export of benzene and some other oil products dropped significantly. There are a lot of issues for Russian root oil, and thanks to those sanctions imposed by Biden and kept in force by Trump, it's a great challenge right now for Russian economy how to survive. Because at least publicly, China and India stated there will be no more import of oil products and oil itself from Russia. And we I believe, will keep the same strategy to destroy Russian oil infrastructure, because this is the only instrument where Kremlin gets money from to feed the army, to buy new weapons, to send attack after attack into Ukraine. Definitely, if we have missiles, it would be dramatically bigger impact. Because if we talk about drones, they can carry on not that much explosives as we need. And definitely, if there is some protections, and Russia right now invests heavily into protections of their refineries, oil stocks, and so on, those drones cannot destroy much. With missile, you cannot avoid big destruction, and this is the issue I'm always questioning myself. Are we ready? And President of Ukraine stated many times that our missiles are already in production. We have some stocks. We are ready to send hello to Moscow and to their military infrastructure. I want to see it not only by TV statements, but in reality, because it's really crucial. When Moscow is under attack, permanent attack, everyday attack, you will see how fast the spirit of war in Russia will be changed. And there will be no big request or call for the army. They will push on Putin to stop this war, because it's a bloodshed of Moscow citizens. This is the only location in Russia where they cherish life. You can send all provinces of Russia to die in the war. Nobody would care. But when it's about Moscow and St. Petersburg, situation will be totally different.
Indeed, and I have recently read some comments of Moscow managers who are praising the quality of life in Moscow and how production of Russian jewelry, clothes, food, etc. flourished under the situation, so they can enjoy now wearing a Russian-produced dress for their wedding, or Russia-produced purses, and drinking Russian wine. So they're enjoying life, but I hope very much that German Taurus missiles will soon be delivered under the new chancellor to Ukraine, and would be able to hit bridges, oil refineries, power stations in Moscow, bringing the war to the city from where this war has came to the world, and in particular to Ukraine. But talking about your own experience as a soldier, you were a Minister of Infrastructure until 2019. Before you worked your life for Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Ukraine, you have got your degree as an expert in finances and in economy. And it's not the job which gives you an impression, oh, this person will fight on the front line and will be hit by an enemy bomb and will get wounded. How was your transformation from the civilian life of a manager and a politician into a life of a soldier in the trench?
It was very simple. It's my obligation as a citizen of my country to protect my country, to keep it sovereign and independent. And sometimes in your life, you can do it only with weapons in your hands. This was exactly the time of my life when I turned out to be an infantry soldier, where I started my military career. Then I was anti-drone operator for a long period of time, then joined air defense, and then fight in many directions in the south, in Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar, Zaporizhia, Kupiansk. So I've been almost everywhere along the front line. I'm personally proud of that I stay with my nation, that I stay with my army. For me personally, it was not a challenge at the very beginning, because it was really patriotic call for all of us to stand up and fight. Definitely, when the first heroic months are past, you understand that army it's really tough. And sometimes you can compare army to the slavery because you don't have many free movements to allow to make. So you are always under some command or instructions, but it's realistic, it's normal because otherwise army cannot function. But for me, it was also natural move because my cousin Vasil Slipak, he was very famous Ukrainian opera singer. He came back from Paris and he was killed by Russian sniper in the fight in the eastern Ukraine in 2016. It was a great loss for our family, and since that I was every month in the battlefield, in the battle line, all those years when the war started. So for me, it was all natural, I would say. So I was ready for the fight. On day one, I took my uniform I had, I took my weapons I had well prepared, and simply joined the battalion, and we started to fight against Russians.
This experience you mentioned, and the name of your cousin, Ukrainian singer Slipak, is absolutely famous. We know that he was one of the first those world famous artists who have joined Ukraine's army before the full-scale invasion of Russia, and who was killed by a Russian sniper, a person who was an inspiration for many volunteers in 2022, of course. When you came into the army in 2022, now we are in 2025, the fascination of the patriotic fight has changed. Many people say they're tired, and they are indeed, even if they don't fight. Many people say we cannot donate anymore because we don't have that income, or we don't know how to work. Our businesses have been destroyed. Our health is destroyed by constant stress, etc. What is the current state of mood of the Ukrainian society? One can hear a lot of desperation and a lot of tiredness on one hand. On the other hand, and say, well, Ukraine fights for the fourth year already in the full-scale war and still beats the Russians. So this society is probably much stronger than it thinks about itself.
I don't think that we are tired. I believe that we simply still do not realize the real depths of our power. Being under Russian occupation for centuries, we were taught that we just an ordinary nation, very peaceful one, singing songs, relaxing, doing nothing, and there are great Russians that tell us what to do. Or there are great Austrians or Poles, depending on the occupation we have over territory of Ukraine. The truth is that we are in permanent wars and fights for centuries. We are the nation of warriors who once forgot that they are real warriors first of all. And then they are IT specialists, agriculture engineers, and many other design professions and many other professions. So once this memory will come back to the nation as one unit, it would be much easier for us to fight. Because we have unique situation in nowadays history. We are attacked only from the east. In previous centuries, we were attacked from all corners and from all directions. So in this unique historical moment, we are backed by the West. In previous cases, we were divided by the West. We were given the lines of Kherson in Western Ukraine, and many other unfair things happened. So yes, we were taking away our nuclear weapon, but we have great support from the West. And we shall always remember, and I talk to every Ukrainian, never, never forget the support you get from the West. Without this support, we all are dead or sent to Red Army to kill other Europeans. So I would say if we feel and find and understand that feeling that we are warriors by nature, it would be much easier for all of us to understand that we are all in the status of permanent war, and the peace itself, it's only a small element of this never-ending war in Ukrainian history, and unfortunately present, and most likely in future. Only by building strong statehold, only by establishing sound economy, building strong armed forces, being united with our allies in the West, we can avoid future wars. If you are too scary to be attacked, if you are too strong to be considered as the occupation territory, you will never be attacked. Nobody will run the risk to enter Ukraine without permission. And that's exactly the lesson that we finally shall teach Russians. We kill all of you. All Russians in Ukrainian territory will be dead. And this story should be told from one successor to another in Russia. Never ever come to Ukraine. We all will be dead.
That is indeed a lesson that each aggressor should get taught. We know in Germany that the memory of the lost World War II still defines German foreign policy, because the lesson was so clear and absolutely understandable. You start a world war, you want to commit genocide, you will be punished, your cities will be turned into rubble, you will be occupied and divided. Don't do that again. That is, of course, what Russian Empire must learn now on their own experience, but it is obviously not the matter of the next months, but hopefully of the next couple of years, not in a longer perspective. Thank you, Volodymyr Omelyan, a major of Ukrainian army, a former Minister of Infrastructure, former employee of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, economist and a foreign relations expert who has turned into a warrior, practically regaining the heritage of Ukrainian nation, which had to fight defensive wars all over its history. Thank you for your fight. Thank you for your sacrifice, and stay strong. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sergey, for inviting me. It was really a pleasure to have such a profound conversation with you, and thank you for standing with Ukraine. I always say that we are not alone, and there are more than 60 million Ukrainians all over the world. So it's a big nation, and a big nation together with our good allies. Thank you. We will prevail.
Thank you so much. And don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe to this channel, and of course, send this interview to anyone who you think needs to watch this eyewitness story. Stay with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.